The rain tapped gently against the windows of Rosewood Cafe, a steady rhythm that had become oddly comforting to Emma Parker over the past 6 months. At 16, she was the youngest employee, having convinced Mr. Jenkins, the cafe's owner, to hire her despite her age. Necessity had made her persuasive. Every shift, every tip, every extra hour she could squeeze in. It all mattered when her mother's medical bills kept stacking higher than she could count. "Order up for table 7. Marge's voice cut through the warm hum of the cafe, pulling Emma from her thoughts. She tucked a loose strand of chestnut hair behind her ear, steadied the tray in her hands, and wove through the crowded tables with practiced ease. 6 months of dodging chairs and balancing coffee cups had turned her into something of an expert. "Here you go, sir. 2 black coffees and a blueberry muffin," she said with a polite smile, setting the order down in front of 2 accountants from the firm across the street, regulars who never changed their order. The bell above the door jingled, signaling another customer, but Emma didn't look up right away. The morning rush was in full swing, and she still had 3 more orders to deliver. It wasn't until she heard Marge's tone shift, more formal than usual, that curiosity made her glance toward the entrance. "Mr. Blackwood," Marge said, her voice carrying a note of surprise. "What a surprise to see you in person, sir." The usual murmur of the cafe dimmed slightly. Even without looking directly, Emma could sense the shift in the room's energy. She knew the name. Everyone in town did. Alexander Blackwood, the CEO of Blackwood Enterprises. The man whose towering office building loomed over downtown, a symbol of wealth and power most people in this small town could only dream of. Emma had seen his assistant before, a sharp, efficient woman who usually came in to grab his coffee, but never him, never in person. "Miss Reynolds is out sick today," his deep, measured voice answered. "Thought I'd get my own coffee for once." Emma kept her head down, focusing on clearing an empty table nearby. She had no time to be starstruck. Billionaires like him existed in a different universe, one where money wasn't a daily struggle, where hospital bills didn't keep you up at night. He'd order his coffee, maybe glance at his phone, and be gone in minutes, a quiet thud on. The floor snapped her out of her thoughts. She turned to see Mr. Blackwood bending down, his wallet having slipped from his pocket. Several business cards had spilled onto the hardwood floor. "Let me help you, sir," Emma said instinctively, kneeling to gather the scattered cards. "Thank you," he replied, his voice softer than before. As she handed him the last card, her eyes caught something else, a small photograph, slightly worn around the edges, lying face up between them. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The woman in the picture had the same chestnut hair as she did, the same warm brown eyes, the same gentle curve to her smile. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. "Sir," she hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why is my mother's picture in your wallet?" The cafe went completely silent. Even Marge had stopped moving behind the counter. Alexander Blackwood froze. His gaze locked onto the photograph in Emma's hands. For the first time since he had stepped through the door, his air of effortless control seemed to crack. His face paled, his usually sharp expression unreadable. "That's..." he started, but the words faltered. His throat moved as he swallowed hard, as if trying to steady himself. "That's Catherine Parker." Emma's world tilted. "She's my mother," she said, gripping the photograph tighter. The weight of every eye in the cafe pressed down on them. The billionaire and the cafe girl, standing face to face, a single photograph between them, holding years of untold secrets. Alexander's lips parted, but for once, he seemed completely lost for words. Emma's heart pounded. She had spent her entire life believing it was just her and her mother against the world. No father, no family beyond the two of them. So why did this powerful, untouchable man have a picture of her mother in his wallet? The rain outside turned heavier, drumming against the windows, echoing the storm of questions swirling in Emma's mind. And in that moment, she knew whatever answer Alexander Blackwood was about to give would change her life forever. Emma's fingers curled around the photograph, her mind racing. The cafe, the customers, the scent of freshly brewed coffee, all of it faded into the background. The only thing that existed in that moment was the weight of Alexander Blackwood's stare and the silent storm behind his eyes. He knew something. The way his jaw tightened, the hesitation in his voice. It was clear he wasn't just surprised. He was hiding something. Emma took a shaky breath, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Why do you have this?" she asked again, her voice firmer this time. "How do you know my mother?" Alexander exhaled slowly, his grip tightening around his wallet before slipping it back into his pocket. He glanced around the cafe, suddenly aware of the eyes on them. "This isn't the place to talk," he said, his voice low but steady. "Come with me." Emma's chest tightened. A part of her screamed to demand answers, right then and there. But another part, the part that had learned to read people, to sense the unspoken weight behind their words, told her this was bigger than a simple conversation over coffee. She hesitated, but then Marge spoke up from behind the counter. "Go, sweetheart, I'll cover for you." Her voice was soft, but there was an edge of curiosity there too. Like she sensed that whatever this was, it wasn't just coincidence. Emma nodded and untied her apron, slipping it off before following Alexander. Outside, the rain had lightened to a mist, cool against her skin as they walked toward a sleek black car parked at the curb. Alexander opened the back door, but Emma didn't move. "I'm not getting in a car with a stranger," she said, arms crossed. Something flickered across his face, maybe the faintest trace of a smile, but it was gone in an instant. "Fair. Enough." He gestured toward a quiet bench under the awning of the bookstore next door. "Let's sit." Emma followed, sitting on the far edge of the bench, keeping her distance. For a long moment, Alexander said nothing. He simply stared at the wet pavement, his hands clasped together. Then, finally he spoke. "I knew your mother a long time ago," he said, his voice softer than she expected. "Before you were born." Emma stiffened. She had spent her entire life believing her father had never been in the picture. Literally, her mother never spoke about him. And Emma had stopped asking after realizing how much it hurt her. She swallowed hard. "Were you?" She couldn't even finish the sentence. Alexander looked at her then, something unreadable in his expression. "No," he said. "I wasn't your father." Relief and confusion crashed into her all at once. "Then what were you to her?" Alexander's gaze drifted, as if searching for words. "She was someone I cared about deeply," he admitted, "and someone I let down." Emma's hands clenched into fists. "What does that mean?" He sighed, rubbing his temple. "Your mother and I met when we were young. She was kind, full of life, always putting others before herself. I was not the man I am today. I made mistakes, and one of those mistakes cost me the chance to be there for her when she needed me most." Emma's chest tightened. "She never mentioned you, not once." A shadow passed over his face. "I wouldn't expect her to." The rain picked up again, tapping against the awning, filling the silence between them. Emma's mind was spinning. If Alexander Blackwood wasn't her father, why did he have that picture? Why did he look at her like she was a ghost from his past? She stared at him, searching his face for the truth. "Did you love her?" Alexander's breath caught. "Just For a second, but it was enough. Yes, he admitted, barely above a whisper. I did. Emma's stomach twisted. Then why weren't you there? He hesitated, his fingers tightening into fists. Because by the time I realized how much she meant to me, it was too late. Emma swallowed hard, a lump forming in her throat. What happened? Alexander's jaw clenched. He looked away, the weight of old regrets pressing heavy on his shoulders. There are things you don't know, Emma. Things your mother never told you. And I don't think she wanted you to carry the burden of them. Emma's breath hitched. Burden? Alexander met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that unnerved her. Fear. This isn't just about me and your mother, he said quietly. It's about you, and whether you realize it or not, you're in danger. Emma's heart pounded. Danger from what? But before he could answer, the sharp sound of tires screeching against wet pavement shattered the air. A black SUV rounded the corner too fast, its headlights cutting through the misty rain. Alexander's expression darkened in an instant. Get up, he ordered, standing swiftly. Now. Emma barely had time to react before he grabbed her wrist and pulled her away from the bench, his grip firm, but not harsh. The SUV slowed as it neared them, the windows tinted too dark to see inside. A chill ran down Emma's spine. Who are they? She whispered. Alexander didn't answer. Instead, he moved quickly, shielding her as he led her toward his car. We need to leave, he said, urgency lacing his voice. Emma hesitated, fear and suspicion battling inside her. But one look at his face, at the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes flickered between her and the SUV, told her this wasn't just some game. Something was very, very wrong. And for the first time in her life, Emma had the terrifying feeling that she was about to learn the truth about her mother, the truth that had been hidden from her all these years. Whether she was ready for it or not, Emma barely had time to process what was happening before Alexander's grip tightened around her wrist. His face was set, his expression unreadable, but there was urgency in his every movement. He led her toward the car, his eyes flicking toward the black SUV that had slowed just a few feet away. The air felt heavier, thick with something unspoken. A cold shiver ran down Emma's spine. Whoever was in that vehicle, it wasn't just a coincidence. Get in, Alexander said firmly, as he opened the passenger door. Emma hesitated. Every instinct told her not to trust a stranger. But was he really a stranger? He knew her mother. He had her picture. And right now, the look in his eyes wasn't one of deception. It was fear. Before she could argue, the SUV's doors swung open. Two men stepped out, both dressed in dark suits. Their eyes scanning the area. Emma's heart pounded. They were looking for her. Alexander didn't give her another second to think. He placed a hand on her back, guiding her into the car before slamming the door shut. He rounded the vehicle quickly, sliding into the driver's seat and starting. The engine in one swift motion. The car roared to life, the tires screeching as they sped down the wet road. Emma's pulse raced as she turned in her seat, watching the two men standing by the SUV, their faces unreadable. They didn't chase after them. They didn't even move. She turned back to Alexander. Who are they? She demanded. What do they want? His grip on the steering wheel was tight, his knuckles white. They're the reason your mother had to disappear, he said, his voice low. And if they've found you, it means they think you know something. Emma's stomach twisted. Know what? I don't understand any of this. Alexander inhaled sharply, as if weighing his words. Your mother wasn't just a kind-hearted woman trying to raise her daughter, he said. She was running, hiding, from people who wanted to silence her. Emma's breath caught. Silence her? Alexander's jaw tightened. She had something, information that was never meant to get out. It was connected to my family, to the Blackwoods. He hesitated, then finally said the words that made Emma's blood run cold. She knew the truth about my father's death. Emma blinked. Your father? But I thought... They said it was an accident. Alexander interrupted. But your mother knew better. She saw something she wasn't supposed to. And when she tried to come forward, she realized the people she was dealing with were more powerful than she ever imagined. Emma's mind reeled. This wasn't just about her mother. This was about something much bigger, something dangerous. She gripped the seat. If she knew all of this, why didn't she tell me? Alexander glanced at her, his expression softening just slightly. She was protecting you. Emma swallowed hard. All her life, she had believed her mother was just an ordinary woman, struggling to make ends meet. But now she wasn't sure she had ever really known her at all. They drove in silence for a while, the city lights blurring past them. Then finally, Alexander pulled into a secluded parking lot behind an old building. He turned off the engine and faced her. There's something I need to tell you, he said quietly. Something I should have told you the moment I saw you. Emma held her breath. I wasn't there for your mother when she needed me, Alexander admitted, but I promised myself that if I ever got the chance to make things right, I would. He looked down, as if the words were too heavy. That's why I searched for you. That's why I kept her picture with me all these years. Emma frowned. You searched for me? Alexander nodded. Because your family, Emma. Her heart stopped. What? My father. He wasn't just someone your mother knew. He was involved with her. He was the man she loved. Emma's breath hitched. The realization slammed into her like a wave. You're saying... Alexander's voice was gentle but firm. Your mother never told you who your father was. But I know. He was my father too. Emma. The world tilted. Emma's fingers dug into her lap, her mind spinning. She had spent her entire life believing she had no family beyond her mother, that she was alone. But now she was sitting beside her brother. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. Emma's eyes burned, but she refused to cry. So all this time, she whispered, you were looking for me? Alexander nodded. Because you deserve to know the truth. Emma exhaled shakily. The pain, the confusion, the fear. It was still there. But beneath it all, something else bloomed. Hope. She had lost her mother. She had spent years feeling like a piece of her was missing. But now, against all odds, she had found something she never expected. Family. Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out the same worn photograph. He handed it to her, his gaze steady. She never forgot you, he said softly. And I won't either. Emma stared at the picture, her mother's familiar smile staring back at her. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone.